Alright guys, welcome to a brand new video. So today we're going to take a look at React Hook Form. So React Hook Form is a third-party library that allows you to perform form validation. So let's say, for example, if you have an application that requires the user to input their first and last name and maybe their email or mobile phone number. So a lot of times you want to make sure you are validating certain fields. The reason why you want to validate things is you want to make sure that, one, your users are not just sending in random stuff through the form, because that's going to go to your API most of the time. And validating is also good, especially it's good for protecting your application from, vulnerabilities. So you want to make sure things like, an email address is actually an email address. Likewise, first and last names don't have, special characters like numbers or at symbols. And you also want to make sure that phone numbers are also valid too. And making sure that you validate these fields also gives a better experience, development-wise as well as application-wise. Your customers will have a better experience and your application will be a lot more robust, because let's say, for example, if you have an application that has mobile numbers that are invalid, then you're going to have to deal with handling that situation, which can give you a headache. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. It's very, very simple to use React Hook Form, and I actually like it. I've used other form validation libraries and I didn't really quite enjoy it, but I found React Hook Form to be very, very simple out of the box. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and make sure we install React Hook Form. It's very easy. So all you do is you just type npm install, or if you're using Yarn, you do yarn add, and then you type in the name of the package. So that's going to be React Hook Form. So that's just React Hook Form. Okay, like this. There's also instructions as well on the website, which I'll leave a link in the description for you guys to check out. And it's very easy to install. So you just type yarn add React Hook Form and then you're done. So I already have it installed already in this project. So we're just going to go right into the code. So they also have good documentation too, and there's a lot of things that you can use for more flexibility, but we're only going to stick with the simple use form hook. Okay, so let me move this to the other screen. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to just create a simple form component. So I'm going to just create a new folder called forms, and I'll call this form a contact form. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to just simply export the variable contact form. And this is just going to return a simple div for now. And then we will just render that inside app.js. So we're not doing anything complicated right now. This is just a simple setup where we have a separate component, and that is where we're going to put our form. Okay, so now let's go ahead and just create a simple form. So let's just create a form, and then we'll create a couple of input fields. So we'll have one input. Field for the, let's just say their name, and then we'll have one input field for, let's say, a mobile number. Okay, so let's do input field, and let's just make this, let's give it an ID of name, and let's go ahead and leave it like that for now. And let's just add a label for this. I like adding labels. So HTML4. So for the label, it's just going to match the name of the ID that this label is for. So that's going to be name. Name. Okay, and then let's just add one more for mobile. Okay, mobile. Now, if we are to go to our application, we should see our form. Okay, so right now, we're also missing a button. So let's make sure we put the button inside the form. So submit. Okay, there we go. So now if I click on here, it should refresh, because that's just how the form behaves if we don't prevent default on the event object. Anyways, so let's go ahead and let's actually add some validation, because right now, if we were to enter some stuff in here, you can see that it's not validating anything, right? So if we were to actually pass in a function, like let's say, for example, if we were to create a simple function to handle the form. So let's just say const on submits. Let's just call this whatever we want. And then we're just supposed to console log hello, right? And then if I add that to the on submit right over here. So whenever we submit the button, or whenever we click on the button, it's going to invoke this on submit function, and it will just log. Let's see. You can see it logs hello really quickly, but because the page refreshes, that's why it disappears. Okay, but there's no validation, and our form is able to submit. And we want to make sure that we add validation. So let's go ahead and do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and call the use form hook. Now this is imported from the React hook form library, so you want to make sure that you either import it by just typing use form and then hitting enter, and that'll automatically import it, or you just import it manually up top here. So import curly braces use form from React hook form. Okay, now this use form hook is going to actually return an object with a bunch of properties, and there's only a few properties that we're going to need to worry about. And some of these properties are actually functions too. So the first one that we're going to import or destructure out is the register. So this register is actually a function that's going to be responsible for registering input fields so that we can actually start validating them. Okay, so we need to make sure we register all the fields that we want to be validated. We're also going to destructure form state. So this object is going to allow us to actually get the errors. So it has a bunch of other stuff too, but we're going to be primarily focusing on the errors. Okay, so if there's any validation errors, that will be all listed inside form state. And then we're also going to get the handle submit function. So this function is going to be used to actually wrap around the onSubmit function. So what happens is that this will allow us to actually call our actual submit function handler only when all validation has passed. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and register our input fields. So to do that, we're going to go ahead and go inside of our inputs. So let's go into the first one for name, and let's just specify a curly brace, because what we're going to do is we're going to call register, but we're also going to spread all of the properties that is returned from the register function. Because when you call register, it actually returns it returns an object. So let's just do this. So let's do const. You can actually do this. So let's do const name input equals register. And let's just give it a unique name. So this is supposed to be unique. Okay, you cannot have multiple registers with the same key. There's going to be some conflict with that. So since let's see, we're registering with the name, let's just console log this real quick and let's see what is returned. So you can see that we get an object and we have the actual name. So whatever we want to name it, just pass that in. We have on blur, on change, and we have a ref. Okay, so the onChange function is going to actually be used for detecting changes, and it's going to also be able to validate as we change the field value. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to basically take the properties that were given from the register function, and we're just going to destructure it inside this input. We're going to pass it down as props, right? So we're going to pass in name input. Just like that. Now you can also just call register like this. You can also just call register inside here name. Because all we're doing is we're just calling this function and we're getting the props that's just going to be passed in to the input element. Okay, you saw that there was the on blur, on change, ref, as well as the name props, and those are all valid props for the input element. Okay. So that should pretty much do the trick, and we're going to do the same thing for mobile down here. So let's just do register, and we're going to give the key mobile. Remember, like I said, it has to be unique. Okay, and there we go. So one more thing that we're going to make sure we do is we're going to make sure we call handle submits right over here, and we pass an on submit. So this will make sure that when we click on the button, it's going to only call this onSubmit function if validation passes. Okay, so right now validation is going to pass because we don't actually have any validation. So there's nothing to validate. So everything is going to succeed. But what we need to do is we need to add some validation. So what we're going to do is, let me just close this tab over here. What we're going to do is we're going to pass in an options, and that's the second parameter for the register function. And there's several validation rules that you can use. So they're actually listed on the documentation over here that you can take a look at. So the very first thing that we want to make sure we do is we want to say, okay, this is required. So this is, for example, if we set the required property to true, okay, you'll actually start to notice that if I click submit, you'll see that the onSubmit function was not being called anymore. You can see hello is not being logged. And if I actually go ahead and just console log form state dot errors, you'll actually see that whenever I click submit, this is going to log in the console on line 10. And you'll see that we have the corresponding field that has an error, which is name. Okay, so this is name over here. And because we set required to true, it is going to check to see if the validation passed. And since it didn't pass, it shows up in the errors object. Okay, now there's other validation rules as well. So this is required. So that basically just means that if you don't enter anything, then validation is going to fail. Okay, but if you enter something, validation will pass, as you can see over here. Now there's also min, max, so that should be pretty straightforward. So there's also min length and max length, and then there's patterns for regular expressions. And then there's also a validate property. So this you can use this to actually do custom validation if you want to. So you can also even call APIs as well to do things like, let's say for example, if you want to do email validation, you can actually, I would actually recommend doing email validation on the backend, because from what I've done, from the research that I've done on Google and Stack Overflow, they've recommended that there really isn't, that you really shouldn't use regular expressions to validate emails. But there are probably separate libraries that do that for you. But I would recommend doing that on the backend, because on the backend you will need to validate on the backend too. But anyways, you can use regular expressions. Okay. So what we're going to do is let's create some validation. So right now we have required true, but we want to give it a message on the screen. So let's go ahead and do this. So you can actually see that if you hover over a required, it will tell you that it can either be a string or a validation rule. Okay, now you can also specify a message. So that's the string part. So we can just say required. Now if I go ahead, if I refresh and if I hit submit, you're going to see that the message is going to say required. So we can give custom messages and we can display those messages. So let's say, for example, if I want to display a message for the user, the way we do that is we want to reference the errors object from form state. So let's go ahead and evaluate this form state.errors object. So let's do form state.errors. So if there are errors, because remember there might not be any errors, so it'll evaluate to an empty object. So we want to make sure that this is truthy to ensure that we're not referencing a field that might be, but it might not even be present in the errors object. Okay. So if form state.errors is truthy and form state.errors dot, and we're going to just reference the field that might have an error. So dot name is the unique key that we gave to this input field. Okay, and so it's going to be form state.errors dot name, and it should be dot, if I remember correctly, it should be dot message. Yeah, it should be dot name dot message. Okay, so let's just refresh. Let's see. Oh, whoops. I'm sorry. It should be form state.errors.name and form state.errors.name.message. Okay. There we go. So, okay, yeah, there we go. So form state.errors.name, if that's truthy, then we're just going to reference the message property. Okay, so that's going to work. You can see that required is being displayed. Let's just go ahead and wrap this in a p tag. Whoops, didn't mean to do object. And let's just go ahead and just give this a color of red so that it looks a little bit more nicer. Okay, cool. So this message is going to pop up when we enter an empty value or we try to submit an empty name. And let's go ahead and do some other things. So we can also say the minimum value of this should be at least, 2 characters, right? So we can say min length or let's just do min length. I'm not quite sure what's the difference between min and min length, if I'm being honest with you. Oh, I think min is probably for numeric values, and min length would be for the actual length of the string. So let's do that. So min length would be, let's see, let's just say, let's give the message first. So message would be, please provide a value that is at least 2 characters. And let's just say value. So we need at least 2 characters. Okay. And so what's going to happen is the error message will be displayed right over here. Okay. So if I refresh, you can see required is being shown, but our min length error type is not being shown. But if I actually type something here, you're going to see that please provide a value that is at least 2 characters. Okay, so you can see that it's being shown over here. Now it's being shown. Okay, so if I type again, you're going to see that it disappears. Okay, so basically underneath the hood, it's actually going to automatically clear the errors for us as we're typing, which is pretty nice. But you can also control that behavior too if you want to, but you can just override the onChange handler. Because like I said, remember the register function returns the onChange function that is passed into input. So if you want to, you can just override onChange right over here and pass in your own function if you want to. Okay. So value word changes to 3, and that means this field needs to have at least 3 characters. Okay. And keep in mind that if I were to type something, it's not going to show the error initially unless if I hit submit. Okay. Yeah, that's pretty hopefully that's pretty straightforward. And let's go into the mobile field now, and let's just do the same thing. So let me go and copy this error message over here, and this time instead of errors.name, we're gonna do errors.mobile because that's the name of this field. Okay, and we're gonna add validation now. So we're gonna go ahead and say required, please enter your mobile number. And let's go ahead and let's use regular expression. Okay, so we want to make sure that the user is entering in something that is we want to make sure they're entering a valid mobile number. So now this is up to you on how you want to structure it. So for example, if you only want mobile numbers that don't have the area code, and it just has like the standard 10-digit. So let's say, for example, an example would be 718.111.1111. So what is that? That's 10 digits, excluding the area code. And we're assuming that this is only going to be valid for phone numbers that are in the United States. Okay, but again, this is up to you on how you want to implement it. But I'm just going to do a very simple example. So we're only going to allow mobile numbers that match 10 digits. Okay, so if it's anything more or less, then it's not going to count. And if it has alphabets in there, it's going to be invalid. So I think the simple regular expression for this would be /d 10. So that means it would have to match 10. Exactly 10 numbers. Okay, let's do the message would be please enter a valid mobile number. Okay, all right, so now if we were to actually test this out, so we have 2 validation rules, so required as well as the pattern. So if I were to refresh and if I click submit, you can see that we have 2 errors. We have required and please enter your mobile number. So now if I type something in the name field, it's going to say please provide a value that is at least 3 characters. So there we go. Now please enter your mobile number. So if I type, let's say, this. Now if I so this actually, let's see, is this even valid? So we have 3. Okay, so this isn't even valid. So so this shouldn't even be valid because it shouldn't match our regular expression. But for some reason, it is trying to, let me actually see. I think we need to wrap this around this for it to work. Yeah. There we go. Yeah, so we had to wrap it around the caret sign and the dollar symbol. Okay, so let's refresh. So please enter your number. Now please enter a valid mobile number. So if I were to type in more than 10 characters, it's not going to go through. If I were to type in less than 10 characters, it's not going to go through. But if I type the correct amount, so you can see that this is exactly 10, it's going to work. There we go. So that's how we can actually use regular expressions to validate our input fields. And now that we don't have any errors, if I were to click submit, you can see that the onSubmit function is being invoked. Now the parameter that is passed into the onSubmit function is actually the parameter of all of the fields. So if I click submit, you can see now we have name and mobile number on line 7. So you can do literally whatever you want with it. You can send this to an API and for it to take care of the form. Okay, so hopefully this gave you guys a good introduction to Reactive form. I definitely would say that it's worth learning how to use this library because it's very powerful and it's very simple. And personally, I like using it a lot. So that's gonna be pretty much it for this video. If you guys liked it, feel free to leave a like and comment down below. And subscribe if you want to. And I'll see you guys in my next video. Peace out.